Hey guys, sorry about the delay. I am ready to go if you're ready. I'm Amy Center. Welcome to this week's Bible journaling session. We're using the simple method, and today we're going to be studying Deuteronomy 8, which is focusing on our monthly theme of humility. And this week we're talking about God's call for us always to remember Him. So you don't have to have these papers to follow along, but I do have this kind of supplements the monthly printable club. So if you've got those pages, you can grab them. If you've got something to journal in, go ahead and grab that. Let me make sure that I can see the comments if you have any questions, and we'll get started. Okay, good. I've got the comments up. If you want to say hello, that would be great. Give a heart or a thumbs up as we go, just to know that you're in here. I love to hear from you guys. As always, if you're watching a replay, you can still comment and I will follow up with you on that as soon as I get to it. So let's get started. Okay, so the simple method is something that I came up with that stands for study, illustrate, map, personalize, link, and expand. And this method kind of helps us break down scripture and reflect on its meaning so that we can connect it to our lives. What I talk about on my website a lot is biblical literacy and spiritual growth. And what I mean by that is we need to understand what our Bible is saying from a historical standpoint, from how it's connected to each other, so that we can understand how to apply it to our lives, how to discern what other people are saying scripture says, how we can grow in relationship to God, and ultimately have that spiritual growth to become the person that God called us to be. So this is kind of combining that literacy part, the biblical literacy part, plus the spiritual growth aspect of it. So I'm going to walk you through that, and we're going to read Deuteronomy 8. And if you're part of the monthly printable club, remember that this month I created a special note-taking page for you. If you don't have a Bible or you don't have one with a lot of extra space to take notes, you can use this. Hello, Kathy. Hello, Lisa. So glad you're here. Thank you for joining the group. And so I wanted to show you this. If you're in the club, you can write on this piece of paper, but I love to write directly into my Bible because then I don't have like a notebook in addition to my Bible to refer to. Everything is in the same spot. And so I've tried a lot of different ones over the years, and this is the one I always come back to. It's the Illustrating Bible. This isn't one I usually take to church because it's huge, but it's my big study Bible because it has so much room to write. And so it's spiral bound and it has tons of room to doodle and write because the margins are really big. The pages are a little thicker too, so if you're worried about the highlighters bleeding through and stuff like that, it's really good for that. So anyways, it comes in NIV and CSB. I am using the NIV, but feel free to use whatever journaling Bible you love and version you love, but that's what I'm using today. And then if you're ever like, what Bible is that? What tools are you using? All that, I have that all on my faves page on amycenter.com/faves, but I'll put the links to all that stuff if you're interested in. So let's get started. This week's passage is Deuteronomy 8. I think I said let's get started 3 times. It's Deuteronomy 8 and it's titled Do Not Forget the Lord. So we're going to see how it applies to this month's theme on humility. So let me zoom in a little bit so you can see better. Okay. So the first step of the simple method is S, and it stands for study. Let's see, can you see this? I do have some pets in here with me, so hopefully they'll be quiet and well behaved. Okay, so the first step is S for study, and that means simply we're just going to read the text and highlight anything that stands out to us as we go. I know this sounds like, duh, you want to read the Bible, but I feel like a lot of times when we're in Bible study, and especially at church, they're like, well, I'm not going to bore you with this whole thing, or I'm not going to read this whole passage, or we're not going to take a whole lot of time to read this. We're just going to, and that irritates me. Like, I'm like, if we're going to study it, don't assume we've already read it or we already know about it. Let's read the whole thing. So I really emphasize that step, that yes, we're going to read the entire chapter out loud, and that way we can understand what we're reading and not just and that's kind of intimidating too, when people assume you already know the story, and it's like, well, I don't know. Am I dumb, or am I not? Is this not my level, or am I not worthy? It's just kind of a mentality that we kind of do at church, is like, we don't want to read everything. That might be boring, but I think we should. I think we should do that more. So we're going to do that today. So here we go. We're going to just highlight anything that stands out to us as we read. And I like to highlight kind of what God's instructions to us are. So I'm going to do that as we go. You just highlight what stands out to you. So I'm going to read, and I'm just going to start highlighting things that I want to talk about that are some of God's commands or instructions to us in this passage. So chapter 8, verse 1. Be careful to follow every command I am giving you today. So be careful to follow every command, so that you may live and increase and may enter and possess the land the Lord promises on oath to your ancestors. Remember how the Lord your God led you all the way in the wilderness. So I'm going to do remember how God led you these 40 years to humble and test you in order to know what was in your heart, whether or not you would keep his commands. Verse 3. He humbled you, causing you to hunger, and then feeding you with manna, which neither you nor your ancestors had known, to teach you that man does not live on bread alone, but on every word that comes from the mouth of God, or the Lord. Your clothes did not wear out, and your feet did not swell during these 40 years. Know then in your heart that as a man disciplines his son, so the Lord your God disciplines you. Verse 6, observe the commands of the Lord your God. I'm going to highlight observe the commands. Walking in obedience to him and revering him. So here's some more. Walking in obedience, revering him. Verse 7, for the Lord your God is bringing you into a good land, a land with brooks, streams, and deep springs gushing out into the valleys, a land with wheat and barley, vines and fig trees, pomegranates, olive oil, and honey, a land where bread will not be scarce and you will lack nothing, a land where the rocks are iron and you could dig copper out of the hills. Verse 10, when you have eaten and are satisfied, praise the Lord your God. So I'm going to highlight, praise the Lord your God for the good land he has given you. Be careful that you do not forget the Lord your God. There's that be careful again, that you don't forget. Failing to observe his commands, his laws, and his decrees that I am giving you this day. Otherwise, when you eat and are satisfied, when you build fine houses and are settled down, and when your herds and flocks grow large and your silver and gold increase, all you have is multiplied. Then your heart will become proud and you will forget the Lord your God who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. Verse 15. He led you through the vast and dreadful wilderness, that thirsty and waterless land with its venomous snakes and scorpions. He brought you water out of hard rock. He gave you manna to eat in the wilderness, something your ancestors had never known, which he said at the top again, to humble and to test you so it might, and in the end, it might go well with you. You may say to yourself, my power and the strength of my hands have produced this wealth for me. But remember the Lord your God, for he, that's another thing, remember the Lord your God, which he's also said. I always like to notice when something is being repeated. That means it's very important to remember. For it is he who gives you the ability to produce wealth and so confirms his covenant, which he swore to your ancestors as it is today. Verse 19, if you ever forget the Lord your God and follow other gods and worship and bow down to them, I testify against you today that you will surely be destroyed. Like the nations the Lord destroyed before you, so you will be destroyed for not obeying the Lord your God. Okay, so that's all of chapter 8. We've done the heavy lifting right there, was reading through that. So I highlighted, be careful to follow every command, remember how the Lord your God led you, observe the commands, walk in obedience, revere him, praise the Lord, be careful you don't forget, and remember the Lord your God. So I found some instructions that God gave to us in here. Feel free to highlight any words or phrases that stand out to you. And what did you choose to highlight? Anything else that you noticed? Put that in the comments for me. Okay, so step 2 is illustrate I. And this part is really fun. This step involves adding symbols and doodles for us to help get a visual of what we're reading so that we can better follow the storyline. So a lot of basically classic Bible journaling, if you ever hear the word Bible journaling and you go to like a webinar, whatever, on Bible journaling, most of the time it's getting out paints and markers and all this stuff and kind of covering up the whole page and just like highlighting one verse and just like maybe making a pretty scripture on the side. And while that is great, and I do have a Bible that I do stuff like that on, I don't think that should be the meat of your study. I consider Bible journaling as a lot of writing, a lot of note taking, and so my doodles are not elaborate, and I draw stick figures. So if you're overwhelmed by this step, don't be. It's a simple step. This is just to help us dig deeper in visualizing it, because kind of when you start reading this, your eyes might glaze over. You like, wait, what did I just read? You have to keep reading, and this visual helps us kind of focus and keep the story in order. So here's some things I noticed. The word promised makes me think of like a heart. Like, I love that we have a promise. I'm gonna get this pen to work. So I'm gonna highlight or draw a heart around the word promised, because I love that God gives us promises, or gives promises to us that are good. They're blessings. Verse 2 and a couple other verses, it says remember. And I think of the word remember, I think of like that old-timey, they used to tie the string around their finger and like the ribbon to not forget stuff. I think of like It's a Wonderful Life. He did that, and he had him on his hand and he couldn't remember what he was doing. So anyways, I draw a little string bow on the word remember, and that shows up a couple times. So I'm going to draw this little bow on there for the word remember. Then let's see, observe the commands. That makes me think of like a magnifying glass or glasses. So I'm going to just doodle some glasses for the word observe. And then manna gets mentioned a couple times, and manna is basically a bread without yeast that God references all throughout the Bible, but it was delivered from heaven to the people wandering in the Israelites wandering in the wilderness. So where did I see manna? Manna is right here. And I'm going to draw that out here because I don't have, you might have a Bible that has like spaces in between, which I really want to go try one of those. Some of them are like double spaced and you can write a bunch in there. I don't need another Bible, but maybe I do. Okay, then manna was referenced again down here somewhere. So that was let's see. Promised heart was verse 1. Remember was verse 2 and verse 18, if you're trying to catch up. Observe, that word was in verse 6. And manna is in verse 3. And I know it's down here somewhere else. He gave you manna to eat in the wilderness down here. That is verse 16. There's another manna. I'm just going to draw it once. Okay, promised land. I wanted to notice, it's like, it doesn't say promised land. It says, verse 7, let's see. For the Lord your God is bringing you into a good land. So that is basically the promised land. I'm going to just draw an arrow right here and label it promised land, because what we got going on here is just a really good visual. It's a good visual for something to draw. It says a land with brooks, streams, deep springs gushing into the valleys and hills, a land with wheat and barley, vines, fig trees, pomegranates, olive oil, honey, a land where bread will not be scarce, you will lack nothing, a land where the rocks are iron, and you can dig copper out of the hills. So you could draw all of that. You could draw one of those things, but I love the reference to the promised land. And let's see, it talks about a valley, it talks about streams. So we've got the mountains, all this big hills. We got the stream right there. Let's see what else we could draw. They had the fields of wheat. Vines and trees. And as you see, I'm just doing those little elementary type trees. You just do it how you want to. So I'm just kind of looking at what he's describing here and making it a visual. So now that when I look at this step, I can see we've got promises, we've got things he wants us to remember. He wants us to observe things. He's given them manna. He's given them that blessing. And then I get a visual of kind of what the promised land looks like right here. And just for fun, since it's supposed to be a blessing from God, I'm going to doodle that on there. Okay, one more thing I noticed was in verse 12. It said, otherwise, when you're eaten satisfied, when you build fine houses and settle down, when your herds and flocks grow large and your silver and gold increase and all you have is multiplied, then your heart will become proud and you'll forget the Lord who brought you out of Egypt. So he's saying, you're going to get here. I'm going to bless you and you're going to have all this stuff. And then you're going to forget me. Don't forget me. And so that's something else you could draw, are the flocks, the herds, the houses, the silver and gold that he's going to bless them with. So you might draw that they've got these, of course, their houses look different. This pen is not being nice today. So I'm kind of drawing what their future is looking like. So they're not there yet. This is just kind of, he's giving them this visual of this is what I'm going to bless you with. And you're going to become obsessed with all of your blessings and forget about me. And I'm warning you not to do that. So here's a couple houses. They're going to have some sheep. Some sheep out there. And then we've got, what else do they say? Silver and gold. So they're going to have some moolah. If you're not in the United States, you can draw whatever your currency is. But I'm in Texas, so I'm drawing little dollar signs. So he doesn't want them to forget. So I'm going to just kind of doodle this. Do not forget the Lord. Just to kind of have a visual of, this is the overview of what this passage is about. Here's a visual for the overview. Okay, so let's feel free to add your own illustrations or color. We can even add color coding. Let's add some color coding in the next step. And in the comments, if you want to let me know what you liked to doodle in there, what stood out to you that you saw a visual, or what did you end up drawing or want to draw for later, if you want to put that in the comments. Okay, so step number 3 is map, M for map. And this is, the M for map stands for thinking maps, which is a tool that I used when I was a teacher, and I still love to use to visualize things and teach other people. And so we're going to basically create or notice different categories so that we can organize the information. And this is what I do whenever I take notes, and then I create these printables and then I sell them to you guys to help you. This is the method that I use. And so a lot of these maps start really, I don't know, simple, and then I turn them into more of an illustration. So lots of stuff in here. If you are in the monthly printable club, you'll have a cheat sheet for humility, but this is a lot. Like you could see my bubble map right here. You can see these little brace maps, or what is it called? Brace maps here. And I've got a lot of that I put into here. So anyways, this is my method. So I'm thinking of, there's like a bunch of cause and effect in here that I noticed. And a good map for that is like a multi-flow map, which I am going to color code some cause and effect. So the causes are probably the commands. So I'm going to do up here, I'm going to have to zoom this out a little bit. So I'm going to keep those yellow because most of these are things that we need to do. And then the effect is what's going to happen if we do them. So I'm going to do that in green, cause and effect, which means I need to look at all these causes, these things that he's told us to do, and figure out what the effect is. And so basically when you've got a multi-flow map, that means you have one big idea in the middle or event, and that is God has commands. He God's requirements, I guess. And so I'm going to pick 3 causes and 3 effects. So I've got what God's requiring. He wants you to follow every command. So I've got that in verse 1. And then it says, so that you may live and increase and may enter and possess the land the Lord promised you on oath to your ancestors. So I'm going to do, you may live and increase and may enter and possess the land the Lord promised. Okay, so you will live, you'll increase, you'll get the promised land. All right, that was verse 1. And then verse 2 said, remember how the Lord your God led you all the way in the wilderness those 40 years. And then it says, to humble and test you in order to know what was in your heart, whether you would keep his commands. So when you remember the way he led you, you're humbled and tested. So God led them to humble and test. Humble and, test. And ideally, these are supposed to go in their own little boxes. Okay, so that is verse 2. Let's see. Okay, let's go down to there's a lot that we could do in here for cause and effect, but I want you to kind of build on that on your own. So I'm just going to pick one more. Let's look at verse 19 and 20. It says, if you ever forget the Lord your God and follow other gods and worship and bow down to them, I'm going to highlight that whole section. I testify against you today that you will surely be destroyed. You will be destroyed for not obeying the Lord your God. Okay, so forget God and worship idols will be destroyed. All right, so there is our, oh, you can't see that, sorry. After the video, I'm going to take a picture of these notes and post them in the group because I know sometimes it's hard to follow along if you can't see what I'm doing because it's too far away or I'm moving around and you're not to that step. So I will post the picture of these. I post them every week in the group. So make sure that you check back in with that later if I'm going too fast for you or you can't read something, because also the photo will be a lot more clear than this video. So let's move on to step P for personalize. And this step is kind of where we ask ourselves, what is God trying to teach me through this passage? What are some practical ways I can use this to grow spiritually? And I feel like this is kind of where most people start with their Bible study, is they just open it up and they're like, what does this have to do with me? What does this have to do with 2024? What is God trying to tell me? And it might not be a selfish thing, but in doing that, you're kind of taking God out of the equation and just being like, all right, what is this? It's turning into like a self-help book, basically. And while this is here to help you, if you're not understanding what you're reading, that biblical literacy part, it's really hard to grow spiritually because you don't understand the insights of what God's teaching you. So I love for this to be a part of Bible study. It's so important for us to personalize it and find some real life application. But I don't think that we should be skipping the other steps. So I think they're all equally important. So here's some ideas of practical ways you can use this to help you grow spiritually. For example, a real life application might be that I'm thinking about listing out times that God has humbled me. Maybe I'm thinking of reflecting on those times. Maybe I want to pray about those times when God's humbled me and trusted me, or maybe a time right now in my life, what's an area that I might need to be humbled a little bit, or even like, how do I feel about the word humble? Does it make me uncomfortable? Does it make me feel joy? What does it feel? And kind of dig into maybe the why. Maybe you don't understand what humbling yourself means or why God's asking us. And so that's something that you want to be like, I need to understand this spiritual discipline better. And that's kind of where my monthly printable club comes in. We're digging deeply into this one concept of humility and looking at it from all different angles so that we can understand it better, because if we want to grow in that spiritual discipline, we need to understand what it is. So, and then why God's asking that of us. So another thing you could do is make a prayer template out of a verse that you notice. One verse that I noticed that would be a good prayer for me is verse 6, where it says, observe the commands of the Lord your God, walking in obedience to him and revering him. So I could use that and turn it into a prayer that I want to say, and I might write this down in my words. Lord, teach me to obey your commands. Hold me accountable for obeying your commands. Help me to observe your commands. So whatever you want to do to put your name in there or yourself in there. Maybe it's a child you're praying about or a friend or something like that. But Lord, help me observe the commands that you've given me. Help me to walk in obedience to you. Help me to revere you. Revering, by the way, I had to look up, I know a general idea of it, but don't be afraid to look up some words to get a really clear understanding of, okay, that's what that means. Revering is like respect and admiration. So Lord, help me to respect you more and your authority in my life. Help me to admire you more. So you might have these things that you turn into a prayer. The last thing that I love to do is find something in here that's a great memory verse. So instead of a prayer, look for something that you can you're not changing the words to make it like a prayer template. You're learning it word for word in the translation that you prefer. And I have picked one for you, and it's been our verse of the week in the monthly printable club. And it is right here. Let me find it. On this sheet that I've got, I have a weekly verse that goes with our passage that we talk about every Friday. And this first week is, he gave you manna to eat in the wilderness to humble and test you so that in the end it might go well with you. And so that's Deuteronomy 8:16 down here. So you might highlight that one. I'm going to highlight it in a different color because we didn't highlight it at all. And that's a good reflection on one of the lessons of humility, is that God humbles us to bless us. And a lot of times we see humbling as a punishment. And while it is depriving ourselves of things, it's changing the way we think and act and react to things. And so he's blessing them with manna, which they ended up complaining about. And he's testing us so that we can grow and become more like him. And in the end, it will go well with you. So this is a great verse to memorize. You don't have to be in this club to memorize it. I'm just letting you know why you would join it and the resources that are in there. I like to cut these out and either tape them to my bathroom mirror, or I cut them out. I used to scrapbook years ago, and so I have one of those corner cutters. And so I'll cut those out so they look a little fancy. And then I just collect them here, like there's August, and here's September's. And I just get a little push pin on the wall and just hang it on there. So I thought that was a nice little trick. So I've got that up there. I'm working on memorizing that. And then the last step, or not the last step, I'm sorry, second to last is link. It is L, which stands for link. That's where we dig deeper into the historical context of what we're studying to make connections to other passages in the Bible. And this part isn't going to take very long. It's more me just telling you what the next steps are going to be. Those we're kind of done drawing on here. So here's some ideas for linking is usually I look at the footnotes at the bottom of the passage and see if there's like little footnotes in here, like if this referenced, he said this because he already said this before in Genesis or something like that. Or it tells you another word for that phrase or something. So I usually look in the footnotes first to see if I can link it to anything. This passage doesn't have any footnotes. So the second thing you can do is just, if you don't understand the context of this, go back and figure that out. So right now he's referencing when they were wandering in the wilderness and he was giving them manna. So you might go back in Exodus and figure out, why were they even in the wilderness? So I'm going to read the book of Exodus, or I'm just going to read the end of Exodus. So that might be a good spot. Also, you might just be like, what is the book of Deuteronomy? Where are they? What's happening right now? And you can use all kinds of resources for that. But I also have these resources, my books of the Bible cheat sheets that I sell on my site. And those kind of take that research work out of it for you and just get a snapshot so that you can link it really quickly. You can see what happened in Leviticus, Exodus, and then Numbers, Deuteronomy. And so that might help you understand, oh, this is a sermon Moses is giving, and he's referencing when they were wandering the wilderness. And before that, they were in Exodus and left Egypt, and what's going to happen after this speech. So it tells you all that kind of stuff in here. So I have all those resources for you to help you link it to what you're reading. The last idea for linking is also foreshadowing. So instead of figuring out the context of when this happens, you're looking for maybe what God is, his promises and the things that are going to happen in the future you might know about, where you're like, oh, that represents Christ, or he was telling them about this and they had no idea this was about to happen. What this reminds me of is he's warning them, you're going to go to the promised land. Please don't forget me. Don't forget this moment right now. And what happens in the book of Judges, which is 2 books later, is they go through this cycle of rebellion and punishment and forgiveness and redemption and blessing, and then they do all that all over again. And so he's just like, it's going to happen. I'm trying to give a heads up. It's like when we talk to our kids and we're like, trust me, if you jump off that thing, you're going to hurt yourself. And they do it anyways. The other thing is I think of is when the kingdom splits and they are eventually exiled and taken over by other countries because they don't follow the Lord. They go and participate in idol worship and all this stuff. So any kind of foreshadowing you see is another great way to link. And our last step is E. Let me show you that real quick in case you're like, what are we doing? Simple Bible notes, study, illustrate, map, personalize, link. And the last step is expand. And this step is where we talk about what we've learned and commit to making Bible study a regular part of our lives so that we can grow deeper in relationship with God and pursue who he's called us to be. So this is kind of commitment that we're not going to stop here. We're going to understand that this is important for us to continue to study, to grow in relationship. And so this week I might commit to growth by continuing to dig into this passage based off the steps like personalize and link. I can also learn more about the theme of humility and find ways to implement that spiritual discipline in my life using the daily assignments in the monthly printable club. So I've also got, if you're not in there or you are and you just need the reminder, I've got the verse of the day that you're going to write. And then I also have the passage of the day that you're going to read. And I let you have a break on weekends because I do feel like it's very important to prioritize Sabbath rest, which I have lots of posts and I talk about that a lot, self-care and Sabbath rest and all that stuff. So expand. I would love for you to join me in the club. You don't have to. You can still do these lessons for free, but they do supplement what we're learning for that. I hope you'll sign up for the club and use those resources to help you grow in humility this month. And next week, I'll be back to study Daniel 4 with you, and we'll focus on God humbling the proud in the example of King Nebuchadnezzar. So I hope you have a great weekend, and I will see you guys next Friday. Thank you so much, Margaret and Lisa and Kathy, and those of you who joined us. I appreciate you. I'll put the links and the picture of the notes in the group, so make sure to check back later. Have a great time, or great weekend, guys. Bye.